Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. Lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you. I know that life outside is so hard.
Goeienaand, good evening fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. And tonight, of course, we're talking about the taxis in Cape Town and SANTACO. But before I get on to that, let me just say to one of our oldest and most loved moderators and loving life family, Mel, happy birthday. I know you're in Ireland, and I'm sure you and Mark are having a glass of red or a glass of white or whatever to celebrate, but happy birthday from the Loving Life family. And, okay, let's get back to the collective term for South African taxis, and that is a chaos of South African taxis. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, I'm going to play you a short video clip so you get a bit better understanding. Here we go.
I do take a point of difference respectfully with the Minister when he says that we should be at the negotiating table. I think he says it best when he says that we should never negotiate with criminality. The fact is that the people that we are negotiating in a negotiating room, in a conference room, are the same people whose members are out in the streets causing incredible violence and mayhem, disruption to our city, and even murder. We remember specifically Officer Kwinana, who passed away this weekend at the hands of this taxi mafia. Now, it is not our approach, and we do not believe it is the right policy anywhere in South Africa that you negotiate with people who are threatening you with violence and who are perpetrating violence right outside the door of the negotiating room. We don't believe that that's a good policy. The Minister, I must just deal with taxis, but I see that the Minister is dealing with Zamas in Gauteng. He's dealing with construction mafia elsewhere. It would never be right for him to sit down with those people to negotiate when they are killing his police officers and killing members of the public in the streets. That can never be a good message for our country. Our message should be, our united message from government minister should be that violence is the last thing that you ever do if you want to speak to government sensibly around a table. If you engage in violence, you will never get a hearing from the government. Then this industry and other criminal syndicates around the country will learn that if you engage in violence, that is the number one way to close the door to any further negotiations and progress with the government. So we've taken a principled position that we will not speak with those who are perpetrating violence until it stops. Now, I think the firm position we have taken has already shown that it is the right position, because we have this piece been quiet this morning, albeit only for 10 or 12 hours. We have it because the taxi industry knows they will get nothing from government, no answer whatsoever, so long as this violence continues. I think, Minister, that is the message we should be sending to criminals all over our country, whether they be in organized taxi businesses or in zamas, or indeed in any other industry that we are trying to deal with in terms of violent crime. You negotiate with criminals, we won't.
I love that clip because you've got what I call the Schlaudi Mutzening of the Ramaphosa ministry, or the ANC ministry. Beke Kele standing next to him, and he looks like he's just completely out of it. Well, he is, but I mean, he looks like it, and it just shows. All right, I'm going to get our guest on. That's Madiny Darries, and we're going to be talking about the taxi situation in Cape Town, and it's not over yet, believe me. Here we go. Hi, Madiny. Can you hear me?
Scott.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I'm not sure
Perfectly.
why. Yeah, now, Madiny, can you turn your camera on? I'm not sure why it's still... Okay, look, I'm going to call you back, okay?
Yeah, because it's exactly the same position it was.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll call you back. Give me a second. All right, guys, I'm not sure what's happening there. You could hear Madiny talking, but it was still calling him, so that's crazy. Okay, I'm going to get him to call me because there seems to be something wrong with the connection on my side. Oh, come on. You got to love Skype when it doesn't work properly. Huh. Okay, let's try again. And I'm going to ask him to, Madiny, can you call me? Let's see if it works that way. All right, guys, I hope you're having a good evening. And yeah, it's our signal in South Africa today are non-existing, says Marlena. Wow. Here we go. Let's see if this works now. Okay, audio. Hi, Madiny. Hi, Madiny. Seems to be something wrong. Yeah, hi, Madiny. Can you hear me? Hi, Madiny. Okay, let me just try again. Sorry, guys. This is very frustrating. Hi, Madiny. Okay, let's try again. Here we go. Oh, no, it says he's unavailable. Marlena, can you call Madiny and ask him please to just restart his mobile phone, because he's actually, we're Skyping on his mobile phone and it's obviously blocking because it's still stuck with the old call. So if he can just, if Madiny can please just restart his phone, and I will, and then if he can Skype me when he's done that. Yeah, you see, it's not picking up because it's thinking that it's still online with me. Okay, let me just say to him, can you please restart your phone, and then call me. Okay. All right. So while we're waiting on Madiny, let me just see what's happening in the side chat. Hi, Francois. Hi, Tokolosh. And hi, Gilliam. Good to see you all here. We've got a big week this week with live streams, by the way, guys, just while I'm waiting for Madiny to restart his computer or his phone. This week, and I've been doing a lot of research on this white spiritual boy and the spiritual, what's it called, the other one? Spiritual Wonder Boy. Those two huge bank accounts, which are apparently at most banks around the world. And it's a very, very fascinating story, I've got to tell you, because when you look at some of the information, it appears to be true. But when you look at other aspects of the information that's been put forward, it's clearly bullshit. So it's a really intriguing story, but okay. Yeah, okay, well, look, I'm just going to wait for Madiny to call me back. Thanks, Marlena. So it's a really, really intriguing story. And if you look at the video I put up this morning, it's all about the Japanese gold and the Marcoses, Imelda and Ferdinand Marcos from the Philippines, who, believe it or not, are very involved in this whole story. Of course, they've since passed away, but there's now a king. He calls himself King of the Philippines. And, look, you're going to love this story. It's got so many turns and roundabouts, and it's a fascinating story. It really is. Hi, Nicolene. Good to see you here. Now, let me just see if... here we go. Let's try again now. Hi, Madiny.
Hey, does it?
That's better. Now we got you. Now we've got you. Perfect. Gee, I tell you what, Skype can be a bugger sometimes, can't it?
I tell you.
So how are you keeping, Madiny?
Well, and yourself, Scott, you good?
Yeah, I'm great. Yeah, with all the madness going on in South Africa, it's absolutely crazy. I'm hearing all sorts of crazy stuff. But anyway, look, you live in Cape Town.
Yep.
And you've witnessed firsthand all the BS going on when it comes to the taxi industry and the taxis and so on. Now,
Of course.
let's cut to the chase. Why did SANTACO, which is the organization that represents all the taxi drivers, why did they decide to strike?
I think that I doubt the decision was a last-minute decision. You know, there's a lot of stories that goes around, when these kind of things happen, where people talk about, political shenanigans and so forth, external influences. The decision for them to strike certainly was not a easy or quick decision. So I believe that it took time for them to get to that decision. The reason why is because apparently the number that's been bandied around is that 6,000 vehicles was impounded. In other words, 6,000 taxis in the Western Cape was in the pound.
Wow.
Now, I can only believe that. The reason why that number is because I've got a cousin and he's got 15 taxis between him and his siblings, right? And I mean, look, they're legal. They pay. They're one of those businesses. They pay tax. They vehicles. They've got a garage for vehicles. When it's unroadworthy, it gets pulled off and put into the garage and it gets repaired. So they don't put unroadworthy or mechanically faulty vehicles on the road. And the month before the strike, they had 8 of the 15 impounded.
Wow.
Why? Not because the vehicles are unroadworthy, because of the behavior of the taxi drivers. So the city, the SANTACO says the city should be arresting and finding the taxi drivers, but it doesn't help because most of those taxi drivers, they're just working for the next fix. They don't care. They come around and they go, dime a dozen. So I think that what the city decided is to be more effective. They go after the taxi owners. And so that's what they've done. And the reality is, of course, SANTACO then decided, look, they're going to strike because 6,000 taxis in the pound. I mean, it's unbelievable,
Yeah.
to say the least. And in fact, when I spoke to my cousin, I was informed that they're at the point also where they cannot take it. It costs him between 2,500 and 7,500 a release fee per taxi, depending on the number of offences. So it's a huge cost, and so this is why they're striking. But look, this business is, of course, an exception to the rule because the taxi industry is largely a criminal industry, right? But we're going to get to that. But this is why they're striking, because the relentless impounding of the taxis within the Western Cape.
Yeah. Well, look, I heard that the taxi drivers, not the taxi owners, are given a budget, and they have to achieve 2,000 rand per day in ticket sales, or from people that they're carting around the place. Otherwise, they can get into real deep shit as well from the taxi owners.
Yeah.
So it's a real dog-eat-dog industry, isn't it?
Exactly. So the way it works, right? The taxi owner, depending on the route, will demand between 800 rand and 1,000 rand per taxi for that day, right? So now the taxi driver is going to first go make it 800 bucks, 800 to 1,000 rand. Then he's going to pay his gachi between 150 rand and 250 rand a day.
What's his gachi?
The gachi, the guy that opens the doors and calls the passengers and
okay.
Screams and shouts and with all the colorful linguistics and language.
Yeah.
And so then he's going to fill the vehicle with fuel, which is between 700 and 800 rand. So we're looking at 2,000. Then he must still go and earn his money.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it is an unsustainable model, to be honest with you, because the other thing is that the routes are capped in terms of number of permits per route, but more than 50% of these, half of these, I would say between the number shows 40% of these taxis on these routes are illegal taxis without permits. So the thing is that this is the reality, and because the taxi industry is unregulated, it's a dog-eat-dog business. There's no standards, there's no policies, there's no rules, there's no compliance to anything. These guys don't pay tax. The tax industry is responsible for a lot of the criminality, a large percentage.
Yeah.
And this is the situation. So the Western Cape government has, of course, put a peg in the ground and said, you know what, we are going to take these guys on. And we also need to understand that there's been a number of attempts, not only by the national government in terms of the taxi recapitalization program and all of that, but also a number of attempts by the provincial government, for example, the Blue Dot taxi program, where every month they gave the taxi owner 15,000 rand per taxi if they were well behaved, if they adhered to the rules, and they were monitored and all that kind of thing. So nothing works. Absolutely nothing works in this industry.
Well, I took a taxi when I was in South Africa in March this year, and I was with a white fella. He had, I think he's got 4 taxis, and he takes a route from the West Rand to the airport. And he was saying to me that just a couple of weeks before I arrived in South Africa, he was pulled over by another taxi, which threatened him, because they said he was on their route, and the taxi driver had a gun and was waving that around. He said it's a really, really dangerous type of occupation to have in South Africa. But just on let's get him back to Cape Town. Now, Johan Rupert, who's the wealthiest man in South Africa, is on record of saying that if Julius Malema or any of the economic freedom fighters ever threatened him, all he would have to do is make a call to his friends at SANTACO, and they would send all their taxis around, and the EFF would scamper off like little rabbits. And the reason I'm raising that is because it's quite clear that Johan Rupert has a close tie-up with SANTACO. And my conspiracy theory is that somehow Johan Rupert is involved in this. And what I'm talking about specifically was he could have, with his influence and his money, because he owns all the banks basically, and that's where the taxi owners get their money from to buy taxis. So, he has a huge influence on SANTACO, but he kept completely out of it. He didn't say a thing. He never went on the media saying, SANTACO, stop this bullshit. He just sat very quietly. And I just wonder, because Johan Rupert is clearly tied up with the World Economic Forum, the One World Government Strategy, the United States of America, Wall Street, all those sort of guys. And this coming week, you've got BRICS having a meeting in Cape Town from the 22nd to the 24th of August. I just wonder if this wasn't a deliberate ploy by Rupert to cause trouble for that conference. Because, you can imagine people in Russia and India and China saying, shit, have you seen what's happening in Cape Town? Should we actually go to the BRICS meeting? What are your thoughts about that?
That is a potential reality. I think we cannot dismiss the way the world works today. We cannot dismiss anything, because these people that are in positions of power, they have to play all sides in order to be able to maintain, the levels of power. And besides that, another interesting fact is that the U.S. Undersecretary of State, Victoria Nuland, was in South Africa about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And wherever she goes, when she leaves, it's a civil war or this outbreak of civil strife, right? And that is well documented in terms of countries she's visited and what proceeded to unfold after that.
Well, look at Ukraine.
And so, exactly. So there's that angle as well, right? And it all leans towards BRICS, the BRICS meeting, because at the end of the day, the BRICS group is the biggest threat to Western hegemony in the world today. To Western power.
Yeah.
No mistake. And there is a rush by countries like Saudi Arabia, like Indonesia, and other South American countries to join BRICS. And these are wealthy countries. And so we can never, ever, put anything under the table as far as these powers are concerned, because they will do whatever they need to ensure that their interests are protected.
Yeah.
So on Rupert's side and Victoria Nuland's side, I clearly will not dispute any of that particular angles.
Yeah.
Because it does point in one direction.
Yeah.
And that is BRICS. So definitely, for sure.
Look what the US did to Iraq and did to Libya after those two countries just coincidentally said that they were no longer going to accept the US dollar in exchange for oil. And because oil is the basis of the US dollar being the global currency, those countries were attacked on a complete furphy. And the ruling regimes were basically thrown out and the leaders killed. And I'm talking about Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi. I mean, they were both taken out, and that was clearly the Central Intelligence Agency working for big business and the US government, and of course the Rothschilds and the fiat money system. Now, okay, getting back to our taxi strike, which seems terribly dull and boring after what we've just been talking about.
For sure.
What were the demands of the taxi industry related to this strike?
Look, for me it's simple. They strike because they wanted to break the law. They strike because they want to break the law. It's as simple as that. I mean, one of the demands is they must be allowed to drive on the yellow line. Okay? another demand is that the taxis shouldn't be impounded. So all of these demands that they made relates to breaking the law. And it's just mind blowing. You see, Scott, what these people don't understand, even politicians, is that, we live in a world where there are laws that are sacrosanct with immigration, something like cause and effect. Okay, bad behavior is not going to have a good outcome, and they just don't understand that. Neither does politicians, and it just boggles the mind that seemingly intelligent people cannot understand how the world works. And so we have a tax industry. And if I may, I just want to read through a couple of to contextualize this industry. Right?
Sure, go ahead.
By the Daily Maverick. Okay, the taxis are responsible for 75% of the public transport in the province, in the Western Cape, and transport about 1 million passengers daily. And you have the two biggest associations, SANTACO, the South African National Taxi Council, and NTA, which is the National Taxi Alliance. SANTACO consists of 123,000 individual taxi operators belonging to more than 950 minibus taxi associations. Look, in Cape Town, the biggest are Godetta and Carter. They both fall under the banner of SANTACO. And apparently, to join an association costs between 10,000 and 200,000 rand.
Wow.
And you cannot apply for an operating license unless you have an endorsement of an association, right? There's big bucks you're talking about.
And
big bucks.
The other taxi associations that have been formed were basically shot out of business, weren't they? I mean, they had gang wars where they took out There was one other taxi association I heard about. I think it began with TNI. I think it was Taxi National Industries or something like that, based in Durban, where the committee were individually assassinated to take out that competition to SANTACO. So it really is a gangster industry.
No, look, it's a criminal business. I think if you look at, according to the Competition Commission, look, first of all, they don't pay tax. So the government really doesn't know exactly what revenue is generated by the industry. But according to the Competition Commission, who did some research, they estimate about 100 billion rand a year, right, nationally. But in the province, the MEC for Transport and Public Works estimated they make about 1.5 million per day, which equates to more than $500 million per year.
Wow.
So if the Western is making more than they're making $500 million a year, which is underestimated compared to what the Competition Commission, which talks about 100 billion, right? So remember that they're transporting 75% of the national population, which are millions of people.
Yeah.
And it's a huge money generating industry. And these guys, I mean, they don't, how can I say, they don't pay insurance. They fight over routes. They kill each other.
Yeah.
They are 40% of them are illegal. And if they see someone riding on the route which they don't know, like you see in the previous example, they will point a gun at them. And I think one also is to consider that what they've done to destroy alternate public transport channels, for example, buses, right? It is well known here, also in the Western Cape, that they have set many buses alight. Even the My City buses, which the government has tried to try to roll out. You must remember, every time they try to roll out into the Cape Flats or into the townships, the infrastructure gets destroyed. So the city cannot roll out My City buses to Mitchell's Plain or to Strandfontein or to Grassy Park or to Khayelitsha or to Langa or to Nyanga. They can't, because every time they do that, it's destroyed. So that they can protect, their business. And then also, if you look at the amount of trains, they say between 2013 and 2019, 214 train carriages were torched nationwide. 214 train carriages, right,
Wow.
were torched nationwide.
Yeah.
And here in the Cape, they actually caught they caught the person that said carriages are light, and he told him, the less rails run, the more the taxis make. He was linked to the taxi industry.
Yeah.
So it's a criminal industry, and of course, a lot of crime emanates from the industry, whether it's drugs, assault, rape, murder, and so this industry in its current shape and form will never find success in this country, and it will be the bane of our existence. And the government will keep it unregulated because the government don't have the wherewithal or the will or the power to control the taxi industry, because a lot of those ministers and public officials themselves are taxi owners. So it's an incestuous relationship that we have between the same government. And so you no matter what the motives are of the city, one's got to commend them for their strong action against an industry which can easily assassinate some of these politicians, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Look, I get that. And, it's interesting. Shavesh has written in the side chat here, the Carver brothers, known as the Mshlanga Taxi Association, they are gangsters involved with the ANC, DA, and EFF. They also meet regularly with Johan Rupert. Now, that's a group in Durban, and Rupert stays in Cape Town. I wonder what Rupert is doing, talking to people like the Mshlanga Taxi Association, which, as I say, is in Durban. It doesn't really add up, does it?
Look, I think, if one considers, the criminality, the pervasive criminality in our country, and in fact in many countries in the world, there has to be some kind of relationship between big business and criminality in order to maintain the status quo, in order to maintain power. So, for example, the taxi bosses, they will maintain control over the industry because it speaks to their interests. They will have a relationship with big business who themselves are protecting their interests through that relationship. So this is, as sick as it sounds, right? This is unfortunately the world as it exists today. And we ordinary people, we just plugged happily into the matrix. Most people are just plugged into the matrix, happily going along their lives, oblivious to the true reality and oblivious to the fact that they're always going to be enslaved to the system. Yeah. They're never going to break free from the system because their minds are completely shackled to the system. And so that is the dichotomy that we have. The extremities that we have in our country.
Now, look, Madiny, is there a political agenda at play when it comes to what the taxis did? Do you think this is political, or do you think it's really just to do with the taxis being impounded and sort of sticking a middle finger in the face of the Cape Town mayor?
Look, at the end of the day, right? All of these politicians are one and the same. There's no difference. If push comes to shove, the DA will form an alliance with the ANC. The DA will form an alliance with the EFF. The EFF will form an alliance with the ANC. This is, it's all about, when it comes to politics, it's all about self-preservation. And I mean, if you have been in Parliament for 3 years, earning over 100K a month, you are guaranteed a pension, a very good livable pension till the year you die. You only have to be there for 3 years. So it is a very lucrative position to hold, and people will kill to get into that position. So if you look at how this thing is unfolded, right? What was interesting is that the ANC National Transport Minister was adamant that the DA was overreaching, right? In terms of the National Land Transport Act of 2009, this particular act, is in relation to public transport. And I looked through the act, right? I looked through the Road Management Act that manages the normal road users as well. And in the section where they talk about, section 87, where they talk about impounding, there are only two instances where you can impound. One, no operating license. And two, you breach the conditions of your operating license. But nowhere can I find what those conditions are. So what it tells me is that the DA has developed their own set of conditions. They understand the law, make no mistake. And that set of conditions speaks to things like roadworthiness, reckless driving, under the influence, et cetera, right? And so they've clearly, what they've done is that they have clearly impounded based on the set of conditions that they've set. Now, they've had this to and fro and tit for tat, and then they said they were going to go to court to determine exactly what those conditions meant. And at the end of the day, nothing came from it. So nationally they're quiet, locally they're quiet, and yet they had this big boo-ha about, this big fight about who's right and who's wrong. And yet nothing has transpired since the strike came to an end. So we have to see how that unfolds. So what that could do, if one look at it from a political perspective, what that has done is basically to, if the DA proves to be correct in the way that they have translated the act, then what's going to happen is the national government's going to sit with egg on their face. And so that could very well be, or could very well strengthen the DA's position in the upcoming election in 2024 to say, look, we've done what you all asked us to do. You know, we've come down hard on the taxi industry in order to enforce compliance, in order to enforce that they operate, and in line with the law. And look at what the national government has done. They have actually told us rules. And so what you have is a situation where that could potentially increase your voters come 2024. So I think that's a very, how can I say, interesting development. And I personally would like to see how that's going to unfold. And I'm waiting for these court cases to come through as well, you know. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Look, I think a very interesting development is that the ANC government are bringing in a system of demerit points for drivers. Because taxi drivers spend most of their lives on the road, taking people around. So they're far more likely to get demerit points than the average person who might drive their car to work and then drive home again. And I know here in Australia, I often used to be sitting on, we had, I think after 12 you had your license suspended for 3 months. And I often sat on 9. And those demerit points sat with you for 3 years. So it doesn't take a lot of incidents like speeding or stuff like that for you to actually have your license suspended. Now, that would be the kiss of death to taxi drivers. And I think if you don't have a valid driver's license, the new rules in South Africa say that you get 6 demerit points. There's I think it's about 2,500 rand you pay, and then you can't drive a vehicle for 3 months. So you think about that and the impact of demerit points on these taxi drivers. It's going to be huge, isn't it? Because they don't know what road rules are.
Absolutely, and the thing is that's coming soon because there was a court case at the Constitutional Court to say that particular system was unconstitutional, but they ruled that it was not, and that they can go into the implementation. So that's busy going to be implemented very, very soon. That will undoubtedly have an impact on taxi drivers, and I think that. But you know, we are in South Africa. Here, you can buy. I mean, you can bribe, you can buy, you can corrupt. So we'll have to see how that unfolds. But absolutely, that's going to have an impact on drivers. Probably me and you driving normally is going to have a bigger impact than taxi drivers. Maybe in other parts of the country, maybe the Western Cape will enforce it. But in other provinces where they get away with murder, it will. But they don't know what's coming with that demerit system, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But bear in mind also that these taxi drivers, I mean, they work hand to mouth, right? It's a hand to mouth industry for them. They come and they go. They 9 out of 10 times these guys. I mean, I was driving today, and the guy drives and he throws his cigarette butt out of the window, and then a kilometer further down he throws his KFC packet out of the window. These are sorry to use the term, but very uncivilized people that drive in these taxis. They have no ethics and value system, so to speak. That is aligned to good practice and good values. Because they got no respect on the road. They litter and they just pull off anywhere, and they just don't care. And this is the mindset, and it's not something that you can fight. I mean, the taxi, 6 was impounded again today. Today's Monday. I mean, the way they were driving on the roads today was unbelievable. One would never say that we just had a taxi strike and 6,000 of the taxis were impounded because they were just driving as normal. No adherence to road rules. So yeah, we got between a rock and a hard place when it comes to these issues.
So why is it so difficult to regulate the industry?
It's mafia. That's why it's difficult.
Is that what it is?
I mean, they will take other politicians. I mean, I mean, we look at how many of the whistleblowers have been assassinated in this country.
Yeah.
We look at how many taxi owners and taxi association officials has been killed in this country. Hundreds. Because Natal is political killing fields.
Yeah.
They kill councillors. I mean, if I want to stand as a councillor and that guy, I'll kill him, and then I'm next in line. It's mayhem. So how is the government gonna? The government turns a blind eye. They don't have a strength. And that is why whether there are external influences, whether there are political shenanigans, one can't but admire, so to speak, the DA for their very, very strong arm tactics against the taxi industry. Whether they had another agenda, I don't know. There's certainly a big money spinner for them. Whether there was agenda in terms of BRICS. I mean, I personally, I think the DA has got very neoliberal policies. I mean, they wanted to arrest Putin should he have come to Cape Town, which was really laughable. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I read that. Alan Winde was going to arrest Putin. I thought to myself, yes, like, bro, you can arrest Putin. And so they've got these neoliberal policies, right? Which makes it very scary for us. That understand how the world works.
Now,
and so they are a danger, really.
Yeah. Now, there's something I want to just touch on with you, and I'm just going to put this on the screen so that everybody can see it. And it's an article that appeared in Cape Talk today, and it says the association's provincial treasurer, Ivan Waldeck, said that they would convene an urgent meeting on Monday. This is this week. And an urgent court interdict that would be filed against the city to stop further impoundments of taxis. Now, this is after they apparently came to some kind of understanding with the city of Cape Town. So clearly, what they're saying here is SANTACO leadership in the Western Cape has hit out the city of Cape Town, accusing it of impounding 6 of its minibus taxis over the weekend. Now, you're in Cape Town. Were you on the road over the weekend? Did you see anything different?
Yeah, no, look, very interesting question because on Saturday I was driving between Maitland and Goodwood, and in Maitland I saw a traffic officer pulling a taxi over. So I thought, whoa, In fact, I had a chat to a friend of mine the day before, and saying that the taxis are now going to have free reign because the strike is over. The city is going to be scared to apply that strong measures they have because they're going to strike again, etc., etc. And yeah, I saw this taxi being pulled over, and on top of that, in the next 2 kilometers to 3 kilometers I drove towards Goodwood, there was about 8 to 10 traffic vehicles on the road. And it appears, when you see that amount of traffic vehicles on the road, you're thinking that somewhere they're going to set up a roadblock or something. Yeah. So it was very interesting. There was a lot of activity. And then I also read that I saw the press conference held by Ivan, the head of SANTACO in the Western Cape, and he was saying that they had an agreement with the city that they would not impound any taxis for 14 days. And the city came back and they said, for certain infringements, but there was 4 that was out of scope. And if I remember correctly, the 4 was operating permit, driver's license, and it was unroadworthy vehicles, and then reckless driving. Okay, those were the 4. So the thing is, even if there was only 4, I mean, that still forms, a very big part of the laws that they break. And so they were very upset that 6 of their taxis were impounded on Saturday. So it's very interesting. So it appears that although they've reached this agreement, because over 14 days now they've got to find a way to get these taxis out, the city is still impounding them based on those four regulations. So there's a lot of activity for sure. I see it on the roads, but we'll have to see how this unfolds. So it was quite interesting, because what we don't want another taxi strike, because it's not good for no one.
Well, I think the Cape Town City Council actually scored an own goal with this taxi strike, because tragically that doctor, apparently he was a top surgeon in the UK who was in his early 40s, took a wrong turn and landed up going into Nyanga, which is an old black African township, and he was assassinated at the wheel and his wife and 2 young kids witnessed what happened. I mean, it was just shocking. And things like that are just, it's a death knell for the tourism industry in Cape Town.
No, it is, because already you start to see on social media, people overseas talking about Cape Town and South Africa being a dangerous place to visit. But the thing is, Nyanga, when you come out of the airport, if you turn left, you're going to go into Nyanga.
Hang on, let me get this clear. If you're from outside South Africa and you go to Cape Town International Airport, do not turn a left as you leave the airport, because you're going straight into Nyanga, which is, I think it's the most dangerous township in the world when it comes to killings. Back to you.
Yes, it is. It is the most dangerous one in South Africa for sure. Most murders are registered in Nyanga. It is just off the N2. The road that runs into Nyanga is called Borchards Quarry. And when you come out of the airport, when you turn left, you're almost like turning left, and then it's almost like an exit onto another road, and then force you to turn right, and that's Borchards Quarry. So if he took a wrong turn, it's as simple as that. And it was reported that he took a wrong turn. He should have just gone straight, and he would have headed into the direction of Cape Town. He turned, and he ended up in Nyanga. And I think, he should have seen, because when you go down that Borchards Quarry, you can already see the kinds of people that you can see the activity and so forth, and that should already warn you that you. And I've driven through there a few times. And people would say, "You're crazy to drive through there because it's dangerous."
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when you're local, you kind of have an understanding of the local environment, and you can kind of handle yourself. But I think for tourists like that, it was just absolutely disaster.
Yeah.
And it's really, really sad. It's very, very sad what happened, and it is a serious indictment of Cape Town and South Africa as far as crime is concerned.
Yeah. Now, just talking about crime, South Africa appears to be deteriorating rapidly. How did it get there?
I think we need to go back. What is interesting, on sometimes you get these statistics that runs across a timeline. Okay.
Yeah.
And I came across one of these videos on TikTok, and they were looking at murder rates, and this timeline ran from about in the 80s to about 2019. And prior to 1994, in terms of murder, South Africa was not in the top 20. But then after 1994, 1993, when you had all those political conflicts between Inkatha and and the ANC and so forth. So from 1992, 1993, you start to see South Africa coming to play, and then it just skyrockets to number 4. through ANC rule. So I think that the what we've seen an ANC government coming to power and not having the capability nor the ability to govern, and that has led to a situation where we have law enforcement that are incapable and inadequate. We have a justice system that is porous, that often doesn't work, and we have high levels, absolutely high levels of unemployment and poverty. And Scott, I just want to tell you this one thing, right? Between 2014 and 2019, they estimate 1.5 trillion rand was lost to corruption. That's 5 years, 2014 to 2019. 1.5 trillion rand was lost to corruption. It was a research, I can't remember who was the organization that did the research, right? But 1.5 trillion. Now, it cost 115,000 rand to build an RTP house. So if you take 1 trillion rand, you could basically build almost 1 million homes for 1 trillion rand. And that's in 5 years. They've been in power for almost 30 years. Had they been an ethical organization that governed and for the people, right, all of the people, you would not have had a situation where we have pervasive poverty and we have huge shanty towns, huge shacks. You would have not have had that, okay? But because of the corruption, what we have is we have this enormous township of shacks having grown uncontrollable because of there not being adequate money to build homes for these people. So, and this is where it comes from. It really comes from a ruling party that has completely lost its moral compass, that is completely, that is focused on self-preservation, that is unprincipled. They're like chameleons. They duck and dive. They change. They change the path whichever's going to serve the interest and the agenda. And this is why we have what we have in the country today, largely because of the ANC government. It's a criminal organization as well. And this is why we sit in the situation in South Africa today, where we fear for the future of our country. We really do. We, like number 3, the highest murder rate in the world. It's a beautiful country and there's some amazing people in this country, but we have the worst politicians and we have a sick political system. And that is unfortunately our reality, and that is what has led to the deprivation and the poverty and the criminality and the hunger that we see in our country today.
Yeah, the scariest part of all this is the fact that the 3 biggest political parties, I'm talking about the ANC, the Democratic Alliance and the Economic Freedom Fighters, they're very different, but they're all as bad as each other. They're all corrupt. They all antagonize and look. The Economic Freedom Fighters are in a class of their own under Julius Malema, but he is a complete and utter racist, and yet he's always pointing the bone at someone else. And that reminds me of what happened just a couple of days ago. I did a video about this. There was a female anchor reporter, and she was clearly pre-apartheid. So in other words, she'd grown up before 1994. And here she was race baiting this guy from Gauteng and suggesting that he was racist because he wanted anyone who was not born in Cape Town before 1994 to piss off back home. And she was saying, well, that's 90% of that would be the blacks from the Eastern Cape. So you're a racist. That was her argument. And he actually spoke very well, and he put her in her place. But this is a problem I find is that when it comes to politics, the actual racial aspect which is supposed to have disappeared in 1994 with the so-called Rainbow Nation, the racial aspect has never been allowed to disappear off the agenda. And when I was in South Africa in March, I found my interaction with the average black person in Gauteng was fine. We had a chat. There was no antagonism, but it's been stirred up by these political parties, and if they continue to do this, we're heading for real trouble in South Africa, aren't we?
No, look, it's a very interesting point you raise, Scott, and I agree with you 100%. I think the issue of non-racialism is a myth in this country. When the ANC came to power, all they did was they continued the nationalist policies, and they just reversed it. Okay, they still applied racist policies.
Yeah.
That left a bitter taste in the mouth of minorities. Remember the colored people, and Fadil Adams of Gatfall, he comes on very strong. Look, I voted for them in the last election. I voted for them in the local government election. So I voted for them for city council. I voted for them nationally, right?
Did they get someone on council?
Yeah, they got 7 seats.
Oh wow!
And this is what I wanted, because we need diversity in our city council, right? And we needed some representation of the colored interest. Remember, colored people made up 60%, 65% pre-1994 of the population in the Western Cape. Today they make about 41%, and the Africans make up about 38%, right?
Yeah.
And what happened was, with the influx of, and Fadil is right when he talks about the influx from the Eastern Cape that impacted on the resources of the Western Cape, and so the DA playing to the black narrative started to pump resources in that direction. And yes, they needed to make sure that these people had basic services, but what happened is the colored people, resources were taken away from them. So if you go to an area like Mitchell's Plain, go to any colored township. Now, I've done some work on the ground in these colored townships, right? I mean, you find 15 people living on a property, 3 to 4 families on a 200 square meter plot, right? Because you've got the main house, and then you've got another 2 or 3 Wendy houses stacked up against the main house.
Wow.
Right? And they are all families, and they're all consuming the water which they have to pay for. Remember, in the townships, in the black townships, everything's free.
Yeah.
They steal electricity, they don't pay for the water, right? But in areas like Mitchell's Plain and Bonteheuwel and all these different areas, they pay for the electricity and they pay for water. So you have all of these people on the property. And when in 2020 during COVID, when I did the water disconnections, when I had to when I went public against the city to fight the issue around water disconnections of people during COVID, I started to discover all of these things, and this was what was happening, and so and this is where Cape Coloured Congress or Gatfall, this is how they came into being, to fight in the interests of coloured people who are now being dispossessed. I mean, we had the issue of Sigwale, which is a township or squatter camp that developed across Mitchell's Plain on your way to town. And these guys used to burn tires, blocking the roads from people going to work from Mitchell's Plain. And it is on this occasion where Cape Coloured Congress, where they made a name for themselves, because they drew the line. And I mean, they went out against these guys. Shots were fired in both directions.
Yeah.
And the people of Mitchell's Plain basically went to war with them. And they stopped, and they never ever did it again, right? And so that gave them, the sort of colored people confidence that, if we stand together, we can start to fight in our own interests. And so this is what the narrative that's been shaped by Fadil. And yes, you can say it's a divisive narrative, and you can say it's a racist narrative. But once you contextualize it, you can say, you know what, it fits into the other racial paradigms that already exists. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because and so if you're calling them a racist, then the ANC is a racist as well.
Yeah.
And then the DA is racist, because they're all propagating a racist narrative. And so this is how they came into being, and they've been making a lot of waves in the council, and also now during the taxi strike, there was an attempt to march, from I think it was from Philippi to Colorado, which is just across the R300, to the shopping centers and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the people of Colorado is the end part of Mitchell's Plain. And the people basically went onto that R300 and they formed a barrier. They stood there, and people like the Cape Colored Congress came to their aid, and they stood their ground and they repelled any intention of people wanting to come over into the suburb. So it potentially has racial connotations, and it can potentially result in racial conflict. Let's see what happened. Look at what happened in KZN when the Indian people of Phoenix had to protect their homes.
Yeah.
And in the day they were arrested and put into jail, fathers and grandfathers and sons.
And not only that,
so
not only that, but the fake mainstream media in South Africa called the Indians who defended their homes racists.
Look, this media, you got to take with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, I agree.
You really got to take them with a pinch of salt. I mean, I don't even read the media anymore. There's one or two. There's sometimes informative articles based on research, and that's meaningful. But when they talk about current affairs, when they talk about what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, what's happening in the West, they just completely aligned, to the WEF narrative. So there's no way we can believe anything they say, really, and the way they report these things, because on the ground there is really a different reality altogether. So I think that we South Africa, as far as I'm concerned, has never been more divided on race than we are today. And this taxi strike that happened, it just reinforced that and perpetuated that narrative again, around race. So it's a very volatile and dangerous situation we're in. We know that there are, for example, Afrikaner groupings that have mobilized themselves. If should trouble come up, there's been groupings in different races that's been planning and grouping themselves and mobilizing in the event of civil strife. And I've always warned, for a number of years now, I said we're heading for a civil war. And people would say, but would criticize me and say, how can you say that? Why are you so negative? What these people don't understand, they don't understand how the world works.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable. They just don't understand how the world works. And people will get to a point where you break them and you need a spark. We saw it in KZN. We saw it now with the taxi strike. And I can tell you now, it's not getting any better. These occurrences are happening more frequently and faster. And unless we have an intervention, it's only a matter of time before we have civil strife in this country.
Yeah. Look, I just want to make the point that I think the coloured or brown people in South Africa have been the greatest victims when it comes to discrimination of any community, because pre-1994 they were treated as second-class citizens. In fact, I have a lot of friends in the Griqua community, and I wrote the book Children of the Mist, which is their history. And they use that now in their schools in places like Kranshoek, where they've got a Griqua community. But I know the Lafleurs, and Alan Lafleur is actually the chief guy, like the big chief of the Griqua. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that pre-1994, the Griqua community were told that they had to sign in as coloureds, not as Griqua, because they didn't actually have a cultural group for Griqua. So a lot of Griqua said, no, we are not coloureds, we are Griqua. And we refuse, and because of that, they were discriminated against. But the entire coloured community were discriminated against pre-1994 because of the apartheid laws, and then post-1994, when the ANC came in, they have been discriminated against again by the ANC with black economic empowerment. So minority communities like the Indians as well, but not so much, because I think the Indian community in Durban are very entrepreneurial, and they tend to be in businesses. But the coloured community in the Cape are the most impacted by these racist laws that were pre-1994 and post-1994 under the ANC. So for that community, nothing has changed, has it?
No, I think an interesting event that also took place was where recently, this happened, I think it happened in the last few weeks, the Cape Coloured Congress, they went around stores in Mitchell's Plain, because remember the ANC made an amendment to the affirmative action bill, where they said now, because before affirmative action was applied based on regional demographics, right? So if you have the majority of coloured people in the Western Cape, then naturally the majority of jobs would go to them. But if you are applying national demographics in the Western Cape, that typically means 80% of the jobs will now go to blacks.
Yes.
And so what happened was the ANC made these amendments, and there's either been propagated into law. I'm not too certain, but there was a big resistance against this particular amendment. But what the Cape Coloured Congress did, they went to businesses in Mitchell's Plain, and they would film it, they put it on TikTok, and they would warn these businesses, and they would say, of all these 20 cashiers, checkers as an example, there's no colours here. When we come back, we want to see colours,
Yeah.
And
That's fair enough.
They started to highlight these things.
Yeah.
And when they start to highlight that, you realize, the oppressive nature of the government against coloured people.
Yeah.
And then businesses plays along. Businesses, I can tell you, Scott, these big business people, they are probably the biggest cowards that I've ever seen. Biggest cowards.
Yeah.
Okay? These CEOs of companies who don't speak out against corruption, who don't speak out against, the discriminating political system, they are cowards. I mean, they can never be people of principle, because they take a back seat as long as they are making their money. They don't care, as far as I'm concerned, the well-being of the country. So many of these business people are cowards. And so I think from a coloured minority perspective, for sure, a lot of discrimination under this current government.
Yeah. So how do we regain control of South Africa? What are the solutions then?
If I must articulate, my approach, it's probably an extremely unrealistic approach, but let me try, okay? Because as far as I'm concerned, I would look at the Singaporean model. What we need, Scott, right, is we need a benevolent dictator. We almost need a referendum for people to decide on whether they want a democratic system, or do they want a almost like a benevolent dictatorship system for a period of time. And let me unpack that a bit, right? So let's say it's almost we appoint a CEO to run South Africa with an executive, that with each executive managing a portfolio. And so we do away with parliament. We don't need parliament. We do away with political parties. So you don't have political parties. We'll save billions of rand, and we'll have someone that for the next 10 years, as an example. So we make the term 10 years because 5 years is too short. But of course, that person would govern within the framework of the constitution, but amendments will have to be made to ensure that there's a high level of oversight and so forth. But we can select a person of principle that is tried and tested to run the country. For me, that is the system we need. This issue of democracy is way, way overrated. It just doesn't work in certain countries. We've seen what happened in the Middle Eastern countries. Once you took the dictator away, everything imploded. Mayhem, chaos, terrorism, just a catastrophe, right? Because it does not work in certain countries. And I think South Africa, this whole democratic system doesn't work. It doesn't work because these people, to be honest with you, most of them are not educated enough to vote. They need to be educated before they can vote, right? And so the system doesn't work. And if it was up to me, that is what we'll do. But that is highly unrealistic, to be honest with you. I mean, maybe if we have a civil war, we can implement something like that, but that's not where we want to go. So if we look at the more realistic approach, I think we're definitely heading. How do we fix it? I think the best scenario we can hope for is a coalition government, which will force a level of compliance to the rule of law, and will bring, I think, more diversity into the political decision making, and not only diversity but also expertise and skills. And I think that is the most likely scenario that's going to play out. And as that scenario plays out, we hope that the leaders that will come through this coalition will be able to apply a high level of values and ethics, because what's missing in this country is ethics. We have expertise, we don't have ethics in leadership in this country.
There's no moral compass.
There's no moral compass in leadership in this country, and that's our biggest problem.
Yeah, it's interesting you talked about Singapore, because in 1994 they had that horrific genocide in Rwanda, where the Tutsis were taken out by the Hutus, and the United Nations sat on the side and watched and did nothing. It just kind of sums up the UN. But if you look at the Rwanda today, and remember 1994 was the year that South Africa became, or got its democracy. Rwanda today is transformed, and it's almost like a mini Singapore, because its whole basis is based around two simple rules. One is meritocracy, which is the best person for that particular job. So there's no cadre deployment, there's no family stuff. You get the most experienced person, put him in that position, and then off you go. And the other one is that if anyone is caught being corrupt, regardless of whether they work for the government, whether they're a member of parliament, whether in business, I think it's a 20-year jail term. And you know what? In Singapore, if you look back in the 1960s, Singapore was a pile of shit. Today, it is the most incredible city. That city of Singapore is extraordinary. I was there a couple of years ago, and the airport alone, you can literally spend a whole day walking around the different I don't know what they call them, but they've got these huge buildings where all the planes park, and you could spend a whole day just walking around the whole thing, and you still wouldn't go around the whole. It's a huge airport in Singapore, massive. But yes, you're right. The Singapore model brought into South Africa could be an answer, but Fidel Adams from Gatval, in the same interview with this anchor woman, said, what we need is the Western Cape needs to secede. It needs to break away from the rest of South Africa, and that way it can actually build itself. When you play with your mic, it makes quite a lot of noise on the...
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Yeah. What do you think about secession in the Western Cape?
There's a lot of people pushing for that. I think that it is not a likely scenario to unfold. We are too interlinked into South Africa to ever become a separate state. I think what is a more likely model would be a federal model, where the provinces has a certain amount of power, to be self-reliant. And I think that is what the DA government has been pushing for, specifically around police, around public transport and so forth. So a federal model is more, but secession is unrealistic. A federal model would be better. But I want to come back to Rwanda, Scott. I think it's incredible how that country is transformed. And the only reason that country is transformed like that is it came out of that civil strife, out of that civil war, right? Where everything broke down and they had the opportunity to rebuild. And I mean, we would want to prevent something like that in South Africa. But if we really look at where our future needs to go, it's very difficult not to agree that that kind of event would probably lead to a much better outcome for South Africa, because we could almost start over, right? But it is really a eventuality that we don't want, because it will be painful for all citizens. But other than that, we have too much rot, too much rubbish in our system, and it's called a politician. And again, what's the Rwandan model? They don't have a democratically elected. Well, they have a elected government, but it's not the sort of democratic system that we see in our country. It has more leanings towards a Singaporean model, which is really a CEO, what I call sort of dictatorship model, in the better sense. Not a dictator that's with brute force, but someone that has authority to make the decisions and to enforce the decisions. And that is what we need, because here they fight with each other in parliament all over the time, all the time. They can't agree, they don't agree, and there's no progress. So something needs to happen, and I think at the end of the day, the laws that makes up this creation is going to come to be in this country sooner rather than later, and something's going to have to give. Whether it's the ANC losing power, as an example, but the danger there is that they go into coalition with the EFF, and the EFF is a bunch of scholars. I mean, that guy's a hypocrite, and a hypocrite is something that you can never trust. The thing is, with the DA, you know where you stand, but the EFF you don't, and that's the danger for us as a country. So it's very difficult to determine where we're heading, but I do think that we're probably heading for a coalition government in 2024.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll just get to election 2024 in a second. I just want to pick up on your comment about a CEO to rule the country. I thought it was quite tragic when the ex-CEO of Eskom, Andre de Ruyter, resigned because he felt that he was just being pushed around and threatened. As well, they tried to poison him apparently in December last year. But the Minister of Mines and Electricity, or whatever the full title is, Mantashe, apparently
Energy.
Yeah, energy. That's
and energy and minerals.
Yeah. He apparently was at odds with de Ruyter, and apparently he is involved in one of the cabal, the apparently 4 gangster groups who are causing mayhem for Eskom, and apparently Mantashe is high up in one of those groups, and of course de Ruyter was causing trouble for him and his group, and that's why they had a basic falling out, and Mantashe actually called de Ruyter a traitor, which was interesting. Because, I thought de Ruyter was doing quite a good job. And if you look at what's happened since he's gone, I think things have gone absolutely pear-shaped in Eskom. But that's just an observation I wanted to make. Let's look at elections 2024. How do you think this is going to play out? You talked about coalitions.
Yeah, look, I think the whole, I think what we saw unfolding in the Western Cape, whether that taxi strike was organic. In other words, it resulted out of real issues coming from the taxi industry. I think the DA is very smart, and we've seen before how they are able to use his kind of situations to their advantage, right? And I think what they've done is, certainly with the taxi strike, they have used it to their advantage to portray themselves as a political party that is prepared to stand up to the taxi industry, that is prepared to stand up to criminality, that is there for the citizens to ensure road safety, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And I think as we start to head into 2024, we're going to see more of these shenanigans play itself out. We saw the National Transport Minister saying they've overreached, they're breaking the law, they have fought back, they say they're going to court. So we're starting to see how these political parties are jostling and positioning themselves because the ANC knows that they're in big, big trouble. I mean, if the black people in this country have got to the point where they are not going to vote for the ANC, you can just imagine how bad they have done, right? So you have the ANC, you have the EFF, you have the DA. Those are the 3 big parties. And then you have more sort of regionally powerful parties. You have Action SA, which I think is going to do very well in the next election. They took Gauteng in the local government election 14%. That was phenomenal, right? It was really very, very It was really well done on their part. And then we have the Patriotic Alliance as well. They did very well in some of the rural areas and in some of our cities. Here locally, you had the Cape Coloured Congress, who is now the National Coloured Congress. They've gone national. They go national for the next elections. And then there's the VF Freedom Front Party, and then you've still got the Akata Freedom Party of Buthelezi in KZN, and so you have I feel that we're going to see a lot of growth in the smaller parties, right? With this next election, I think people are going to abandon the big parties. I think the ANC is going to lose. They're going to go about 40, 45, 44%. The DA is going to probably maintain or drop slightly. I don't think they're going to increase. The EF, same. They probably, I don't think they're going to grow beyond where they currently are. But I think a lot of the shift is going to be towards the smaller parties, and that's a good thing, because now we're going to start to see more diversity coming into a political system, and that is really what we need, because we do have some good people in these parties, and so I hope that these good people are going to come to the fore. I mean, you got someone like Gayton McKenzie, having listened to him, he was very impressed. I was very impressed with some of the stuff that he said, and his worldview. And so I think that if these small parties can collectively come to bear, we can start to see a shift in the dynamic. What I'm concerned about is they don't fall into the trap of entitlement that the other political parties have fallen into. But if we can have that diversity, I think we're definitely going to see some good diversity going through into the next election, with some strong coalitions coming through. Now, having said that, in the past, coalitions have not worked. So the coalitions were largely between. I mean, if you look at the city of Johannesburg, it's a mess, absolute mess. Okay, that token mayors from Al Jamaa as an example. We've seen these coalitions only between the big three, between EFF, DA, and ANC, and in some of the rural areas we've seen Patriotic Alliance, and they made a difference. I just hope that we're going to start to see more of the smaller parties gaining more seats, so they can have a stronger leverage when it comes to these coalitions. If we have that, then I think we might start to see a little bit of difference coming through the system.
Yeah. Look, I had a live stream with the leader of the ACDP, Mashu, last week. And I was very impressed by him. I think the ACDP are going to do very, very well in 2024. I can see that.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they've taken a strong position on moral issues, right?
Yes.
They've taken very strong. So from a religious perspective, they've always been on the forefront of some of these new world order agendas, right? I've seen them demonstrate outside the Western Cape Parliament for some of the LGBTQ plus material that was being taught in schools and curriculum. They wanted to reduce that kind of influence and stuff like that. So they have clearly stood up for some of the moral principles, so to speak. So it's going to be interesting. And I think with the last local government elections, they campaigned quite hard, but they didn't gain any seats beyond what their current position is. So let's see what happens. I mean, I know you heard Gayton McKenzie speak as well. Also very impressive, especially in that issue that I think it was Alec Hogg that interviewed him. And yeah, it was quite impressive in the way he responded to some of the questions and what he said and his view of South Africa going forward. So I'm hoping we're going to see, if we don't have a change in this election, Scott, we're in big trouble.
Yeah.
I can tell you now.
Yeah, 4 more years of ANC would be a disaster. And
we are going to be in big trouble.
I just want to, just before we wrap up, I just want to bring up another strategy which is now becoming quite popular because of this coalition situation in South Africa. And that is what they call the Moon Pact, which has been brought out by the DA, where they're trying to get the minor parties to become part of like a organization under the Moon Pact, where they'll cooperate and they'll work together. And it's interesting because the ACDP said, no way are we going to do that because we don't want to be associated with the DA, which is pushing the woke agenda. Whereas the SNP, and I spoke to Christopher Claessens about this again last week on a live stream, he's the leader of the SNP, or Spectrum National Party, are part of the Moon Pact. And he was saying, well, he was trying to defend the situation because he said that, you know, that way we can sort of have a common vision. But as you said just now, coalitions never work because you've got the greed factor that comes in, and then whoever basically has got the balance of power and they don't need the miners, they're just going to give them the bum's rush and say, tough titties, you know, go away. We don't need you anymore. So politics is a very dirty game, and I think people have got to understand that. So, yeah, what do you think of this Moon Pact?
I think that, you know, depending on, let me just say, politics coalitions up to now has been very difficult in South Africa. But I do think that our political system, as far as coalitions are concerned, is maturing. Lessons have been learned, and you know, people now know what works and what doesn't work, and they understand the nature of politics in this country, and you know, and negotiation and so forth. But I think that it makes sense for me for parties that are more aligned than misaligned to come together, okay, in terms of their policies. Because to have this massive plethora of political parties, each, you know, beating its own drum, doesn't make sense. So if you have a party that is, you know, sort of center left, and you have maybe within that center left circle, you maybe got 5 or 6 political parties. It makes sense for them to come together. And so I think maybe I mean, speaking about it now, maybe it makes sense to do that kind of analysis and say, let's look at the parties that are left of center and look at the parties that are right of center, and in terms of their policies, and look at how many are residing within these areas. And maybe it makes sense. We can never, you know, discard anything that can potentially work in the country. When you are completely misaligned in terms of policy, you know, like the ACDP and the DA, which has very neoliberal policies, right? And that's the scary thing for most people. Then, of course, you can never get to that kind of alignment. But even the Freedom Front is very far from the DA, which is like you said, very woke. I to be honest with you, I don't see any party that is 60 or 70% aligned to the DA. Yeah. You know, if one considers, because just the whole approach to you know, to global politics, the whole approach to global dynamics is just so WEF that it's absolutely scary.
Yeah.
But then again, you can almost say the same thing about the ANC. The ANC, they have these veils, they have these masks, okay? So they might pretend to hold a certain position, but when you look at the policy they implement, it is actually in opposition to that position that they pretend to hold. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about a number of them. So one could almost say that the ANC, from a neoliberal perspective, is more aligned to DA than most other parties, which is actually quite scary if you consider the whole COVID situation. I mean, we locked down after one infection. We locked down. Can you believe it? Right? We locked the whole bloody country down after one infection. Yeah. And so I think that is just
crazy.
And it was another ANC. So when you talk about neoliberal, yes, that just takes the cake.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult question to answer definitively, but I do think that it makes sense that, you know, political parties that aligned in their policies 60 to 70%, it makes sense for them to come together.
Right. Now, look, I just want to thank you, Madiny, for coming on tonight and talking to us about the taxi situation in Cape Town. And I just want to address people watching. We've got about 50 people watching on our YouTube channel, and we've got several hundred watching through Loving Life TV. Guys, please remember to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. We have live streams most nights at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time. And if you are watching through Loving Life TV, please remember to register there. I should also just let people know that tomorrow night's scheduled live stream with AfriForum on their trauma unit with Johan Klopper is being postponed. So there will not be a live stream tomorrow night because Johan Klopper has got a death in the family, and he's got some other, obviously, personal stuff he has to deal with. So we'll have him on probably in September. Now, before we wrap this one up, Madiny, is there something you'd like to say to people watching this live stream? Some message you'd like to give them? Maybe a message of hope, or just your thoughts on something that's happening in South Africa? Over to you.
Yeah, the thing is, one can never lose hope, because if you lose hope, you've lost everything. In my interactions, I've been blessed to travel the length and breadth of this country by road in one of the businesses that I'm part of, and I also have spent a lot of time on the ground in the townships in various social activities. And I can tell you something, that the majority of people in this country, they just want to be able to take care of their families. They want to have a roof over their heads. They want to have clothes they can wear and food to eat and take care of their families. By far, the majority of people. And so for us as the ordinary South African, each one of us need to be an activist in order to be able to drive the transformation that this country needs. We can no longer sit, and take the back seat and hope for someone else to drive this transformation. We have to. Each one of us need to be activists. We need to strive to do good in our communities, and in order to maintain the hope. Because I believe that our salvation of this country rests within the ordinary South African.
Right.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Madiny. And look, we'll certainly try and get you back later in the year, because there's always something topical to talk about.
Always.
Have a great evening.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay.
Thank you for having me. All the best.
Okay,
Cheers.
bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Okay, guys, that was Madiny Darries, sorry. And we were talking about largely the taxi situation in South Africa. Just to remind you that this Friday evening, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, I'm going to be the guest, and I'm going to be talking about these two huge bank accounts. I'm talking about the amount of money that is allegedly in them. I'm talking about White Spiritual Boy and Spiritual Wonder Boy, which apparently have links with the Vatican, links with the British royal family, links with Ferdinand Marcos, believe it or not, in the Philippines. I've been doing quite a lot of research on this, and it's a very, very interesting subject, because I'm not going to let the cat out the bag, but if you watch Friday night, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, and you'll see that during this week I'll be posting a video which is associated to the background to these two huge accounts, which apparently are at the South African Reserve Bank. And we're talking not trillions, we're not talking quadrillions, we're talking several zeros above that sitting there in these bank accounts. So it's a huge amount of money. It's more than the GDP of South Africa sitting in a bank account, allegedly. And that's the discussion for Friday night, so don't miss that. It's going to be a very interesting situation. And what I will be doing, I'm just going to let you know this, that I'll be having a bunch of PDFs that I've discovered on the internet related to these two bank accounts that I'm going to ask Nat, who looks after our forum, after the live stream to put them onto the forum, and then I will put links to those PDF documents, which are fascinating, absolutely fascinating stuff, that you can download and have a look at for yourself. So that's Friday night, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time. Okay, now, thanks to the moderators for looking after the side chat, and as I said a moment ago, there will be no live stream tomorrow night because obviously our guest has a death in the family, so he can't make it, but the rest of the week is as per schedule. I'm going to go out this time with Hier Bly Ek Boer, and I know Marius will love that. And just once again, Hier Bly Ek Boer is actually now a video which you can go and listen to on the YouTube channel that this has been streamed through. Have a great evening, guys, and bye for now.
Meer as 61,000 van ons voorvaders het op die grens vir ons gesterwe, sodat ons vry kan wees. Die is my land, die is my reg, hier is ek boer. Van stof is ek gemaak en sal ek terugkeer. Die Bybel is die woord waaruit ek leer, soos die grond op die aarde. Hier bly ek boer. Soos 'n dief in die nag sal die vyand kom, maar hier bly ek staan en ek draai nie om, want jy maak my nie bang nie. Hier bly ek boer. Die is my land waarvoor ek sal veg. Die is my bloed, my sweet, my reg. Die is die plek waar my voorvaders leef. Die is my land, hoor wat ek jou sê. Die is my land, wat my mense voer. Hier bly ek boer. Soos 'n blasem in die somer wat vreugde bring. My oupa wat maniekiero kon sing, soos hy stap deur die lande. Hier was hy boer. My wortels lê diep in die grond geplant. Hy sien soos my pa, los ek vir jou die land, en jy hoef nie te vrees nie. Hier sal jy boer. My land waarvoor ek sal veg. Die is my bloed, my sweet, my reg. Die is die plek waar my voorvaders leef. Die is my land, hoor wat ek jou sê. Die is my land, wat my mense voer. Hier bly ek boer. Die sal kom. Sal kom, die leeu 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 sal kom.